So another race down under, another race in Australian Grand Prix, which for us used to be first race of the season. Used to be great waking up after 3 months of no F1 action, watching a nice race, qualifying race at 6 a.m. So yeah, this time it was the third race. This time, yeah, it was a pretty exciting big race. But yeah, good to be back down under. Sorry for the late upload, guys. I had some issues. But anyway, yeah, let's get right into it. So yeah, Max Verstappen led the field away down under from pole position, but after a great start by George Russell in the Mercedes, got past him by the first corner, which was pretty much unexpected to be honest. And Max was very much too cautious and overly cautious you'd expect. But yeah, George Russell went to the first corner in front, and lo and behold, turn three, you have Lewis Hamilton passing Max in a daring move. Actually, it was a brilliant move by, catching Max. Max was very, very, very overcautious at the beginning, but I guess you can afford that if you know you get a quick car and pass. Anyway, and the first car to go off and retire was Ferrari. Yeah, yeah. I mean, if it's not an electrical problem, if it's not a driver incident, it's just bad luck. I mean, yeah, it's. I mean, for Charles, pretty much. I mean, I think that what Charles can take into account or motivation is that last year Max pretty much had the same beginning with two retirements in the first three races. I mean, looking at Sainz's pace throughout the race, it was very, very good. Which you can only imagine how quick Charles could have been. I mean, Charles for me is like half a second quicker than Checo, Carlos. So I mean, what could have been another race of what could have been for Ferrari? But yeah, well, what can you do? What can you do? So anyway, yeah, the race did continue, and well, continue. I mean, by continue, I mean a safety car came out because they couldn't clear the wreckage out. So the safety car came out in lap one. Now, what this meant was that this allowed some teams to pit a strategy because it was a one-stop race in which the drivers all started on the medium tire and then use a one-stop strategy to go into the harder tire. Now, strategy dictates, well, at the time, it would be beneficiary to pit while the safety car is out because then you save 11 seconds of your pit stop because the drivers around you aren't going at full speed because there's a safety car out. But no, yeah, it came out. So pretty much those who decided to take a chance there took the chance there. Now, what happened after that, after the race restarted and it continued, Alex Albon decided to smash the car into the wall while running all by himself. Driver error, really. It's really hard to explain, but anyway, Alex Albon sent the car to the wall around lap 7. Now, what that did was bring out the red flag. Yeah, the red flag pretty much screwed everyone who had pitted during the first safety car because what that means is all the cars that hadn't yet pitted were now able to get into the pit lane and change their tires. So all the drivers that pitted prior to that lap 7 incident by Alex Albon, who had counted on all the others pitting, pretty much lost lost their advantage, which screwed everyone else's. Now what happened then was George Russell decided to pit from the lead. Now that was a good strategy on paper because that meant that with Lewis and Max staying out, they will still have this. Well, they will still be required to make their pit stops, albeit with fresher tires in the end. But in terms of grid position, track position rather, it will have, in the long run that strategy was going to help George Russell because the people who was challenging for the race, which was Max and Lewis, well, yeah, went pitting. So originally, then it was a good strategy, but then it's a red flag. So yeah, that's pretty much screwed this. He's screwed his race because that meant now that Lewis and Max, because of the red flag, were able to get into the pits, change their tires onto the same tires that George Russell had just changed into. So yeah, it was unfortunate, but anyway, um, yeah. Then the restart followed. Then the second start of the race weekend with Lewis on pole and Max in second. And off they went. Lewis held off Max on the start. Max again cautious at the beginning, and they pretty much went even Stevens. Nothing big to write about. But the first two went away. Well, the first three opened a gap on Gasly, who was at that point fourth, and Gasly was just driving a brilliant race up until then. Then, of course, as you expected, DRS zones came up and Max passed Lewis as if they were going in opposite directions there, approaching turn 9 and 10. I mean, yes, we know that DRS is DRS, but I mean, that Red Bull DRS special is reportedly worth 3 to half a second on its own quicker than the rest of the DRSs, depending on the track. And with Melbourne having four DRS zones, the first track with four DRS zones, it was pretty much inevitable. So yeah, Max went past Lewis as if they were going opposite directions there, and Minion behind them, pretty much even competition there. And George had to fight his way back from seventh because that's what happened at the red flag. And well, while making his way up, which was very surprising, he had an engine failure, power unit failure. Now, as slow as that power unit has been since last season, and this is so far, if there's one thing Mercedes were had in their corner was reliability. So this is quite an unusual sight. You usually expect this kind of retirees from a certain car, from a Renault called Ferrari. This is what you expect from them, or a Ferrari engine car, but not a Mercedes. But anyway, pretty much once even Stevens, Checo was fighting his way from the back. Pretty much after the disaster qualifying he had, pretty much going off all the time in turn one. He produced some outstanding drive, passing cars left, right, and center. Yeah, this was there for the benefits, and there. Another one was having a not bad race was Carlos Sainz, but Ferrari bad luck was just about to knock in. But yeah, he was working his way back up. He was also one of the drivers who pitted alongside Bottas and George Russell, who pitted on the second safety car just before the red flag was out. So he lost out in position, but which I thought was good. I mean, he was popping in some good lap times up until then. So yeah, I mean, Carlos had to go back and fight his way forward from seventh, but I mean, picked his pace up until he got up to fourth. Chased Gasly for a while, was driving brilliantly again, but he eventually had to fight his way through. And then lap 47, Max was pretty much forgotten by then. I think at around 10-second gap, 11-second gap. Um, Pretty much forgot it was existed until he was so bored he decided to go for a spin. Well, not really, but he went wide enough to come back. Pretty much what he did in Hungary last year when he did a 360-degree spin and still won by 10 seconds. So apparently he was complaining about having to lock every time he approached 10 to 10 13. So, but yeah, he made it back in one piece, advantage of having a big gap, and pretty much continued with his with his race up until then. So pretty much what you'd expect was a normal, well, back to normal race until then. Yeah, back, back from Max, back in the field. The McLarens were having okay after a really, really dull first two starts of the season. The McLarens were okay. Um, Lando was running in the top 10 around the 52. Made a great pass on Nico Hulkenberg, who must be must be gone to stream really these past few days. Driving brilliantly once more. I mean, hats off to Nico Hulkenberg. I mean, he started in qualified in the top 10, seventh, and ran pretty much in the top 10 the whole race. I mean, went back a few cars, which is expected, but it was pretty much normal. Until, well, his teammates decided to go for straight for the wall. Unprovoked, all alone, not really fighting anyone. But I just, Kevin, I don't know what happened. He just decided to go straight for the wall. I mean, to the point that he didn't even feel the car hitting the wall. That's what it says in the press conference. But I mean, it was strange. But I mean, that was just the beginning of what was just to follow, what was about to follow up after that. Now, what that did was bring out The third safety car, which then in turn brought out the red flag for the third time in the race. Now, this never happened before in history, especially with 3 laps to go at the time because it was lap 55. They decided to bring out the red flag. Now, I don't think it was necessary for me. Personally, I think it could have just used the safety car because, or at least the safety car and a safety car restarts, not the chaos they did of red flagging a car and then going for a standing start. I mean, first of all, the cars were now on colder tires. You have 1 lap or 2 laps to decide everything. Now, what happened afterwards was always going to happen because I mean, how can you make cars restart a race with 3 laps to go? What they should have done here is what Michael Massey did in Abu Dhabi, not in the terms of letting the left cars through, but in terms of restarting the race. You can't have a red flag with 2 laps to go. Uh, yeah. Anyway, that's what they did. Ridiculous, just ridiculous. And what's also irritating about about FIA is it always takes them about 2.5 years to come to a decision. So there's always this time, like in Verstappen's title-winning race last season and the Abu Dhabi debacle, and now this. It's like they're always surprised when something happens, and now they suddenly have to meet and decide because how can it take them a whole 20 minutes of being stuck in the pit lane because it's a red flag to them coming to a decision? And now you're putting drivers to go back on track to start the race with 2 laps to go on soft, cold tires. Of course, something was going to happen. But anyway, the race started again with, for the third time this time, with Max Verstappen now, of course, in the lead. Pretty much the first two cars went to the first corner. And then now this is where all the carnage started. First of all, Checo ran into the back of Fernando Alonso, which pretty much sent him spinning into turn one. At the same time, you had Logan Sargent running to the back of Nick de Vries at the back, if you can look at the back of the picture. Now, also, at the same time, you have Checo Perez running wide in turn one because of the cold tires. So you get one, two, three incidents happening at the same time and caused by roughly the same. Yes, of course. I mean, driver error, but I mean, it's more. I blame the cold tires for this. It can only be the cold tires. Anyway, now Alonso's now facing the opposite direction. Chico's out of the track, and Nick De Vries and Logan Sargent are headed out. Also, who's also someone who, at this point in time, might have thought that he had escaped all the carnage that was happening is Pierre Gasly, going for a nice hole-in-one down the golf course between the curb and the and the third part. Now, what happened after this was, as he came back onto the track, now when you look at the picture, you'll see the two pink cars, those BW cars, those are the Alpine, the pink because of the main sponsor. When he came back onto the track, he came back, well, to be honest, guys, they didn't much check. I mean, when there's this huge speed differential, by that I mean when the car is pretty much slower than the other cars around, you tend to look at your mirrors because the other cars are moving way quicker than you are. So yeah, Gasly just didn't look into his mirrors. Now that's driver error, expectedly. Well, we can't blame him, but what that did then, it meant that he ran into the path of his teammate who was coming up from behind, which was his right. Now, what that means is that both Alpines took each other out, which is pretty much a nightmare for any team, for both of your drivers to take each other out, whether it's driver area, mistake, whatever. But pretty much, it's like shooting yourself in both legs, really. I mean, couldn't have gotten any worse for Alpine after that, after running fifth in the top 10 for the whole race, pretty much up until then. I felt so badly for Gasly. Lance Stroll, pretty much the same thing happened in turn 3, ran wide because of cold tires. So after that, it was another red flag, a fourth one. Um, third one, I was pretty much lost counted by then because of that incident. I mean, both Alpines were in the wall. Stroll managed to make it back to the pits, but Back at 10-1, remember there's Alex Albon, not Alex Albon, Logan Sargent, and Nick DeFries back into the wall. So by then, it was it was pretty much chaotic. Now, at this point in time, then came for the FI to decide whether to restart the race, how to allocate the finishing positions. And one thing they kept on raising is that they had to finish, they had to be a 58 lap race. Now, the question in point here was whether do they continue with the remaining cars, which at the time was eight, because eight cars went out in that lap, or they take the order from 2 laps prior. Now, they do that if the cars haven't yet passed any sector, because how can pretty much by the time the accident happened, they hadn't crossed sector one. So there's no official classifications to put any cars in any particular order because they had not passed any timing zone, which in this case was sector one. So that's why, well, obviously it took them 3.5 years to decide this, to award the finishing positions to the positions prior to the Kevin Magnussen incident, prior to the red flag. So yeah, it was a really really confusing end to the Grand Prix. They handed Carlos Sainz a 5-second penalty for causing the accident for hitting the back of Alonso, who was very, very. It was really, really sad to hear him beg, literally beg the race director to change his mind, but they just didn't. So yeah, the race finished under the safety car. Um, yeah, who would have thought? Who would have thought? Yeah, the race finished weirdly. Uh, I think the biggest people to benefit, I mean, benefit from such a chaotic race. I mean, McLaren finished in the top 10. Uh, both cars finished in the top 10. Max won. Pretty much had my bet on me anyway, but I didn't expect such a chaotic race, such an exciting race. But yeah, that's what pretty much happened. Max and Lewis, first and second. I'm not trying to be a hater here, but I don't want Mercedes to be delusioned like in Brazil last year, where being qualifying in the top three, top two, top three positions, and running in the top three positions and finishing in the top two. Um, f- I don't want them to get ahead of themselves. I mean, when you look at the chaos checkered on Saturday, an off unusual weekend for Aston Martin. I just can't. They just couldn't get the hard tires to work. I think that was the main problem. And then you had Ferrari again. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, this is not a Ferrari podcast. Anyway, you had the top three with Fernando Alonso finishing. Last Stroll, quiet race. Didn't see much of him. It was kind of like a Valtteri Bottas or a Guan Yu Zhou. I usually forget those units. I don't know what happens. Checo fight back, driver of the race, driver of the day. Fought back to P6, to P5. Lando finally points for McLaren. I mean, Norris finished in P6, Piastri finished in P8. So finally something worthwhile to celebrate. Double points finishes. I mean, home race, it couldn't have been gone better. Actually, his manager, Mark Webber, also finished sixth in a Minardi back in 2002, if I remember correctly. So him and his manager both scoring points at home in the first race at home. Must be nice to celebrate. And then Hilko Hulkenberg, brilliant drive. I mean, it was unlucky previous race, I believe. Also suffered with the safety car there. So, I mean, here he just kept stacking his head and driving. Nico Hulkenberg, for me, I rate him as quick as Daniel Ricciardo. That's how I rate Nico Hulkenberg. I mean, I still can't believe he's never had a podium. But yeah, I finished seventh. Great points for Haas. And again, yes, homeboy Piastri finished eighth. And then came Guan Yu Zhou, who of course benefited, and Oyungun Yuki benefited from the carnage. Not the carnage, but earlier retirements from earlier cars. Yeah, and then yeah, you got them running off the top 10. Valtteri Bottas, unlucky twice actually, pitted when Charles crashed in the one, and then as I said, was one of those drivers who was pretty much disadvantaged at the first parts of the race. So yeah, yeah, take a deep breath there. was a very exciting race, guys. But I think the most disappointed drivers of the weekend would be Carlos Sainz and the two Alpine drivers. I mean, they're good for points, probably around 10 points this weekend, Alpine, and pretty much went out the window. Carlos and Ferrari just, and along with Charles, nothing just went on. Yeah, pretty much the race. I mean, Kevin Magnussen went for the wall. Nick Sargent crashed. Logan Sargent crashed in the third restart along with Nick De Vries. So yeah, a really really exciting weekend, guys. Yeah, I don't know what more I can say. I pretty much bent out my voice watching this race, and I think I'm gonna bring it out again reviewing it. But let me know what you guys think. I'd really love to have your comments, guys. Please comment in the comment section or at least like. But yeah, it was a very really exciting race. It pretty much set the tone for the rest of my Sunday. Hence the late post. So another fantastic race. Another race down under. Now after this, it's gonna be a long, long, long break away. Um, you pretty much imagine none of the teams are going to be taking a break, especially Ferrari and the chasing teams to Red Bull. So, because China was cancelled, there's pretty much no race was fitted in the slot. So, the next race is in Baku, Azerbaijan. Yeah, so pretty much the cars will be. I'm expecting the cars to be different then in terms of various teams bringing various upgrades. So, we'll just see how things go. But in the meantime, we'll just be reviewing what's been going on so far and watching over the latest news and reviews that's happening in the world of F1. So thank you for watching, guys. Still early days, but we'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. Anyway, enjoy your rest of your week, and in the meantime, during the break, remember to start your engines.